Um, First of all, let me just welcome everybody. My name is Chris Wells. I'm with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. With me tonight is Steve Welch of the Virginia Department of Transportation. Also with us is our Jane Edmondson and Jenny Phipps of the Dranesville Board of Supervisors Office of Fairfax County. And we all want to welcome you to this meeting. The script is that I will do from memory is that this is a WebEx meeting. This meeting is being recorded, and so therefore it will be available on our website a couple days after it gets cleaned up and posted. The best way for you to ask questions tonight is with the Q&A feature in WebEx. Please do not use the chat feature because the Q&A feature is the only feature that will show the questions to all the panelists. In addition, there'll be a slide at the end that'll instruct you how you can ask a question from your cell phone. And in addition to that, there'll be contact information on how to provide comments and contact us in traditional ways. So with that, Jane, would you like to make any opening remarks on behalf of Supervisor Faust? I see you're unmuted, but I don't hear you. Sometimes there's a delay. Okay, Jane, I apologize. I see you're unmuted, but I cannot. We cannot hear you. And sometimes there's a delay. Oh, there you are. I see you now. Maybe we can hear you. Okay, thank you. I'm sure it's the supervisor's office welcomes everybody. So I'll give a quick introduction about why we're here tonight, and then Steve Welch will do the VDOT presentation, and then I'll finish up with the county presentation. And then please hold all your questions to the end. So the basic premise in what we're doing here together is the roads get paved every summer. Not all the roads, but some of the roads get paved every summer in Fairfax County. And you may or may not be aware, but the roads in Fairfax County are owned and maintained by the Virginia Department of Transportation. For over 10 years now, we've collaborated with VDOT to look at these roads when they're being repaved to see if there's any opportunities to change the striping to the benefit of the community. Of course, when the roads are paved, it's like a blank canvas, so the stripes that were there get covered up with asphalt, and we can either put back the same stripes or put the stripes someplace different. And what we started 10 years ago was really just building our bike network, so we were really focused on just bike lanes. But in the past few years, as we've worked together and worked with the communities, we've learned that, more people are concerned about cut-through traffic and speeding and the quality of life in their neighborhoods than, of course, that there are bicyclists. So what we found is that this is really a win-win, that we can add links to the bicycle network, but also by adding those stripes to the road, it adds the perception of the narrowing of the roadway and helps reduce excessive vehicle speeding and has other benefits that I'll go over later. So that's the basic premise. With that, I'll hand it off to Steve Welch of VDOT, and then I'll be back later to talk some more. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I am going to go ahead and share my screen and work up here. One moment, everyone. I'm coming. All right. Can everyone see my screen, Chris, otherwise?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. All right. Welcome again. My name is Steve Welch from the Virginia Department of Transportation. I'm the Assistant Director for Transportation and Land Use, and I'm going to go over VDOT's paving program that we do statewide. So for the agenda tonight, I'm going to go over several items that you can see here about our program budget, questions that we typically hear, pavement treatment types, and a dashboard, and a few other items. So just to start out, Northern Virginia District's paving program accounts for about over 14,000 lane miles in Northern Virginia that we are responsible for. In Fairfax County alone, we have over half of that, of 7152, as you can see. And then the breakout in Loudoun and Prince William counties each are about half of that. And then Arlington County is 232 lane miles, and that's because Arlington County largely maintains their own roadways, with the exception of all the interstates and some of the primaries. So there's that's the reason for it being a lot different for Arlington County. So over the last several years, you can see our budget for the last 8 or 9, 10 years. This year, we have $108 million dedicated to the 2021 construction season for paving alone, which is a good thing. We're happy that we're able to provide that much, given what kind of year that we've been in this past year. I think we were a little worried that it might, budget-wise, the economy and the current public health pandemic may have an impact on that. But fortunately, it's worked out to where we're able to continue moving forward with it. So our construction season actually goes on, for paving anyway, all year long, like most programs. And this time of year in spring and summer, we're actually beginning to gather data for the next calendar year. So all of our contracts are signed, or most of them are. You'll see some work's already started to get underway in some places, and more will be released throughout the course of the year. But in the summer and the fall, we continue moving forward for the next year, collecting data, preparing schedules, and kind of coordinating the overall program. And then in the winter, we're completing out the contracts from this past year and getting ready to advertise for bids, receiving those bids, and executing contracts for the upcoming year. So it is an all-year occurrence, with the construction season typically April to October, but sometimes we get March, like we're getting to this month, and sometimes we get a little bit of November. So that's why sometimes we do have a little bit of surprise work that we're able to do or fit in. It kind of depends on the weather and the budget, of course. So how are the roads selected for paving? As a common question we get, they're based on pavement condition, traffic volumes. Sometimes when we do 2 or 3 neighborhoods that happen to be in very poor condition next to each other, there might even be a fourth one or another one nearby that we are able to perhaps go in and do the main road going through the neighborhood. And that kind of has to do with economies of scale and mobilization costs. So the contractors unloading milling equipment and other construction equipment on a site may finish all the milling, which is tearing up the surface of the pavement, and then move that equipment to the next site while they start rolling and paving new pavement in the current one. The other thing we look for is whether or not we try to avoid, of course, any projects that might be coming in the next year or 2, 6 months. And also we coordinate for what we know from the utility companies that have gas lines or other underground types of projects that may be coming. And sometimes it's unavoidable because there's emergency work, such as a water main break or something like that happens, and none of us can necessarily control that. And also we get feedback from maintenance crews. So how do we collect the data? We have these specialized vans that we contract out all over the state. And these vans are heavily equipped with all types of electronics. And it detects pavement distress, roughness, texture, rutting. It scans the imaging on the roadway. It takes measurements of the cracks, how far apart the cracks are, digital video and imagery, and of course GPS. So quite expensive piece of equipment, and it does a lot of work for us to analyze how we go about doing our paving. So once that data is all collected, which we're doing now for the next year, it goes eventually into a rating system. And typically we set a threshold of we have to remain at that rating of what's called critical condition index, or CCI, technical term, but of 60 or greater. And so we're always targeting, as you can see on the color graph on the left side, any roads that are very poor and poor. Obviously, we have to address all the very poor ones first and the poor ones after that, and try to get up to even others beyond that as the budget allows. And but we never let it get below 35 on interstates, and overall, we really won't let it get any farther than that. So how often do we collect that data is another question we always get. And we do this annually for the interstate and primaries. And beginning this year, we're going to be doing it annually for all the secondaries. And why is that important? It is that over in the past, we've only had the capacity, although still very good, to do 20% of the secondary roads every year. So in a 5-year period, we're gathering the data on 100% of the secondary roads, which basically do consist of over 50% of all the roads in the county. So another one is traffic volumes. We utilize traffic volumes to also figure out how to go about approaching which roadways are most important, and in combination with the other things that we just talked about. So we also look at high volume interstate, primary and secondary routes with an AADT of greater or annual average daily traffic greater than 3,500 vehicles. And our goal is to make sure that 82% of that network, all the high volume interstate primary and secondaries, maintain at least a CCI or rating index of greater than 60. And then we have a low volume and primary and low volume secondary roads that we set the goals of 75 and 60% for. And again, somewhat budget driven. So over the last several years, you can see we've managed to stay at least at the 82% or 80%. And last year we're up to 83, maintained 83% on the interstate and primaries. And the real challenge is the secondaries. Secondaries are what everybody knows as their neighborhood roads. And back coming out of the 2000s into the early 2010s, we were coming out of the recession, and there were, as I showed earlier, there was some budget challenges, and we've been slowly working our way back to trying to address those and increasing and focus on secondaries over the last several years. This past year, getting it up to almost the 60% mark, which was our target. So what types of pavement treatment do we do? We do have 3 types of preventative maintenance. One is slurry seal, albeit not the most popular, but it is one that, as its name says, it's a sealant that's put on, and then it has a very fine stone to it that gets swept over top, that sticks to it, and it's brushed and sealed and brushed off to provide extension of the life of the pavement. We also do patching and crack seals as well. But the main one that everybody sees is what we call plant mix or mill and overlay. So we mill a couple inches, sometimes up to 4, depending upon the condition, depth, other things. And then we overlay it and put back all the pavement markings and possibly sometimes change them, as Chris talked about earlier. And then on occasion, we do full depth restoration or reconstruction, but that's only on rare occasions. So a couple of things that we do to communicate how things are with respect to the pavement plan is that we convert that pavement data into maps that are interactive. What you're seeing here is actually a screenshot of Reston area, particularly Reston Town Center, right in the center of the screen, albeit this one's a couple years old. But again, the scale here is that the red is very poor, the pinkish is kind of poor, and then yellow all the way up through blue is excellent. So that kind of communicates which roads we need to target and says what the conditions of our roads are. A couple things to point out about this map is on the left side is the town of Herndon, and we don't maintain the city and town, the roads in the cities and towns. Also, you'll see some gaps in other areas where there are commercial facilities, maybe some townhouse complexes and condominium associations that are all privately owned, and they maintain their own roads. So these are strictly VDOT roads, which again, over 14,000 lane miles. So the other thing we do is we also then each year, and we just released it here in Monday of this past week, have the map up for the upcoming year. And this happens to be a screenshot that I did on Monday of the 2021 season this year in pretty much the Dranesville area, and south of it, but kind of in the center of our Fairfax area here. And what you see is the roads are all that are going to be repaved in some fashion, mostly mill and overlay, are shown in red because they're scheduled for this season. And then you as a user can go onto this site and click onto a road, and kind of in the center of the screen there, you see that I clicked onto one, and then up pops the panel there that says the project manager's name, phone number, and email, and then has further information about who the contractor is and what the type of work is. It's under schedule. PM right there means plant mix, and that's in the legend. And you can communicate with the project manager before the projects get started, when the project is occurring, and even after the project, if you have questions about your road that's getting repaved in some type or way or fashion there. So that, and that again, that's an interactive map. You can zoom in, zoom out, go to different places, but it is an entire statewide map. So each year when we do the pavement plan, we develop our pavement plan. Part of the work that we do, of course, is to have to eradicate the pavement markings off the roadway first. We put down sometimes some spray temporary markings, especially if it's a big project. And then our goal is generally to replace in kind with our contractors, but we do some adjustments where we might improve a crosswalk because it maybe wasn't lined up well, or add edge lanes, or make us some other improvements that we work out with the contractor during that off season of the winter time as we're adjusting or getting ready for the season. We also do in the middle bullet, make some safety and operational changes. Perhaps it might be lengthening a turn lane where the pavement space is available to do so. And sometimes it's creating a turn lane where there's no median, or no, I should say median island, but there is pavement there and a width to do so. So we do work those in. And then lastly, in the last bullet, as Chris talked about and we'll be talking about here further, is we work with Fairfax County together to kind of identify, county has the comp plan for bike ped that Chris will talk about, and in some cases we work with them, of course, to figure out if there are locations where we can do shared lanes or standard bike lanes or buffered bike lanes and other pedestrian improvements. And then we'll adjust our contracts accordingly to marry up with what the county is looking to do as part of their bike ped program. So that's just kind of the big picture of it. So if you ever have a question, you can call the number on the screen, the 1-800-4ROAD. Easier yet, you can go onto my.vdot.virginia.gov. A palette will come up where you can put a little information and your question in, and we have a ticketing system that captures it and sends it to the right person. And it can really be about anything, but in particular, we're talking about the pavement tonight. But also both the Pavement Condition Map and the 2021 Paving Map is now available on the virginiaroads.org website. So that's the program, and I want to thank you and stay safe, and I'll turn it over to Chris from here. Thank you, and I'll be able to answer questions later.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Now I will share my screen again. There we go. Okay, so again, I'm from Fairfax County, Steve is from VDOT, and we work together on this. And what is our role at the county? Well, our role is, of course, to implement county policies and to work directly on behalf of the residents of the county. So as I explained, what we do is we look at the roads that are being paved, see if there's any roads that are basically excessively wide, and whether it's a wide 2-lane road that could just have bike lanes, or whether it's a 4-lane road that doesn't really need to be a 4-lane road because it's carrying a lot less traffic than anticipated, and we can make those a 2-lane road. So in Dranesville, we've been doing this for a few years, so there's actually not a lot of restriping proposals this year, but let me just give you a little bit of the background. As I said at the beginning, or in case you came on late, the idea is to really improve the community, of course, for building a bicycle network, but also to give us those added benefits of reduction of excessive speeding, better organization to the striping if you have parallel parking, for instance, things like that. We originally just started focusing on the bicycle network. Our county has a bicycle master plan, but we soon realized that there was a holistic approach that really had other benefits. The county's been doing this with VDOT for many years, so in some parts of the county, we're actually really starting to see a lot of connectivity of different networks. So when you combine our trails with these on-road bike facilities, you really are starting to see the benefits of a network. In these past 6 years, we've been able to do a couple hundred miles of bike lanes through this process. The most important thing probably, though, to me, and maybe to you as a taxpayer, is that this is about the most cost-effective thing we do. My typical responsibility at the county is working in our capital project section, where we work to identify and fund and build trails and sidewalks. And the cost of those have just really gone up over the 18 years that I've been doing this. To fairly high levels. I mean, those are complex projects. Widening a road to add a sidewalk or a trail is essentially like widening the road itself. You need to clear out 10 feet, 12 feet off to the side of the road, make it level, add whatever facility you're building, grade back or tie into the adjoining land use, relocate utilities. And so our capital project costs are typically in the millions of dollars, whereas this process is super cost effective. VDOT deserves credit for absorbing the costs of these additional striping, because if they were just putting a double yellow line back, that would be simpler. But the cost of adding these is in the tens of thousands, for a road, countywide, all total, a few $100,000. But again, compared to the, millions, or, we have a pedestrian bridge in Tyson's that's important to us. That's 13 million. Compared to that, this is just a super cost-effective process, and VDOT really deserves a lot of credit. To me, this is, I always try to remember to say that this is really a good news VDOT story. VDOT gets picked on if the snow plow doesn't come, and we're talking about paving if there's potholes, but VDOT really does deserve a huge amount of credit for being willing to work very hard to make this process work, because this is a very dynamic process, as Steve said. They're in this paving business year round, and we have a very tight window between the fall and now, where we identify these roads, we meet with the board members, we're meeting with the public at this time, and these paving guys are coming in a month or two, and VDOT has to develop these striping plans and get everybody, in line, and make sure everybody knows what's going on. So VDOT really does deserve a huge amount of shout out for helping us with making our communities better. So why are we interested in bicycling? Well, we know that there's been a focus on bicycles in the United States for 40 years or so that hasn't really worked. Whereas other parts of the world focus more on off-road facilities. In in the United States, we were typically just focusing on the type A cyclist, the bicycle commuter, who felt comfortable riding in traffic and riding with cars. And so what you've seen for these past few decades in the Dranesville district on roads like Dranesville Road, for instance, we've been able to build roads and add roads where we have bicycle facilities on 4-lane divided roads. But a 4-lane divided road where cars are going, 45, 50 miles an hour is not the place that I would feel comfortable riding, and certainly not the place that a family with children would feel comfortable riding. So in America in the past few years, it's actually been a dynamic time of transition in bicycle best practices, where we realize we really need to build more off-road facilities along, our major roads, but we still want to have these paving facilities that we're talking about tonight, because they're typically in quieter residential neighborhoods. They've got the space, they have these additional benefits, and they actually are comfortable and safe to ride. So again, it all forms a network. And the graph, the pie chart you see in front of you here talks to the type of cyclists we have been trying to serve in America, and the type of cyclists we're trying to serve now, and where we're headed in this county. Typically, we've been focusing on that tiny yellow slice of the pie there, the strong and fearless bicyclists, 1% of bicyclists. But we know that there's a 9% group that's probably where I fit in, halfway confident and halfway enthusiastic. But really, the most people in that 53% part are interested in cycling, but they're concerned for their safety. And then there's a part of the population that we call them the no way, no how. They're not riding a bike, and that's fair. The other thing that we've been focusing on, and we're changing our focus on, is we've typically focused on bicycle commuters, people who are commuting to their jobs. But of course, we're a big county, and what we know is that people are interested in riding a bicycle in their communities, to do things in their communities, like go to their schools or their parks or their swimming pools or their places of worship, or their local grocery stores or other retailers. And so those are the trips that of course, we have a huge traffic problem in this area, and air pollution, climate concerns, and everything that adds up. And so we know that if folks can feel comfortable, if they have a facility to ride a bike on, and they can do their trip or their errand without polluting, that's got all kinds of health benefits, so on and so forth. So what are we talking about in these facilities? So what you see here in the middle is the standard bike lane, and that's a 5-foot bike lane. That's when a road is wide enough to have extra space, it's simple enough for us to carve out a bike lane without parking. On the right, what you see is a more comfortable facility, and that's when we have enough room where we can actually stripe a buffer between the cyclists and the passing vehicles. And that buffer can vary in size. Typically it's 2-3 feet. And in even better world, and when we are able to do more things someday, and if there's the safety concerns, we could even add a vertical deflection there, like flexi posts or things like that. So that's a more comfortable facility. And when 10 years ago when we started this, that wasn't even something that was on our radar, and we didn't really do. But in the past few years, we've been able to do buffered bike lanes in more places. And then on the left, it's the opposite end of the spectrum, which is when there's not room for a bike lane, but yet we have a bike lane for hundreds of feet or thousands of feet, and we come to a block where it narrows down, and then we got bike lanes ahead. Well, we know that we've got this bike route there, and if there's not room for a bike lane, then what we want to do is do this shared lane marking, or a sharrow as it's called. And that has two purposes. It indicates to drivers that they should be aware that there could be cyclists there, and then it also can be placed in the lane where we think the best place for the cyclist to be. So if a lane is wide enough, that's typically to the right of the lane. But if the lane is narrow, we'll actually put that in the center of the lane to indicate for that block that the safest thing for the cyclist to do is to actually take the lane. And again, we're typically talking 25-mile-an-hour applications here, so that's perfectly acceptable. So I talked about the benefits, and briefly, this is an infographic that we created a couple years ago. The top left, it talks obviously about the improvement for bike lanes. The top middle talks about pedestrian safety, which is, I haven't mentioned yet, but that's part of our process here and part of what we're interested in feedback tonight. The pedestrian safety's increase, as this graphic shows, because when we add the bike lanes, the road is narrowed, or the travel area is narrowed. So the vehicles are in this area that is more in the center of the roadway, and so the exposure risk to pedestrians is reduced to that area where the vehicles are. The upper right graphic is showing how, as just a pedestrian walking down the street, you now have a more comfortable environment because the buffering of the bike lane or the bike lane with the buffer has now moved that vehicle that passes you by over 5 feet, 7 feet or so. So they're not going right past you when you're on the sidewalk. The lower left graphic is indicating the other benefits such as improvements to noise levels and speeding. And as I said, it's because that perception of the road narrowing tends to make drivers go slower. And that's very important to neighborhoods with safety and cut-through issues, and is something that is demonstrated in before and after data that we've collected. I don't want to oversell that. What us engineers use is something called the 85th percentile, and that's the speed that I guess 85% of the people are going at. And that's really only affected about 1 mile an hour or 2 miles an hour, our data shows. But what our data does show is those excessive speeders, those speeders that are going 15, 20 miles an hour over the limit, they're effectively eliminated when we do a striping plan like this. So that's a huge pedestrian safety benefit and a huge quality of life benefit for neighborhoods. And then the bottom right graphic is important to you if your house has a driveway on a street that we introduce bike lanes, because it actually increases your ability to have better sight distance pulling out of your driveway. Engineers use a sight triangle around the obstructions, such as the parked vehicles here. And again, by moving the vehicles into the middle of the roadway, your ability to see them is improved. Oops, how come my thing didn't go forward? There we go. Okay, so here's a before and after picture of Annandale Road to show you what we're talking about. Again, when a road is wide open, a driver doesn't have to pay as good attention or exhibit as good driving skills as they need to, because they've got room to drift all over the place and be distracted, and they tend to drive faster. When a road gets the striping treatment, you see the photo on the right. We've introduced the bike lanes. We've better delineated the parallel parking, the radius coming out of the side street. And then when the bike lane approaches where you would be making a right turn, we use those little tiny dash lines that we call puppy tracks to indicate that you're, as a driver, supposed to merge into that area to reduce your speed to make your right turn. So this year, 2021, in Dranesville, the one road that we've identified that would be a good candidate for restriping is PARCHER Avenue in the Herndon section of the Dranesville district, the Herndon section of Fairfax County in the Dranesville district, outside of the town of Herndon. PARCHER, if you're familiar with it, is a fairly wide roadway. It's probably the elementary school up there in the distance on that photograph. The area we're talking about is the section from Centerville Road to Maladay Drive. The existing conditions are that it's 2 travel lanes. There are sidewalks on both sides. There's significant on-street parking on both sides, and there's currently no bicycle facilities. So the proposal would be what you see in this photograph. Again, from Centerville to Maladay, we would add the bike lanes, and then all the existing legal on-street parking will be maintained. I should mention on the issue of parking that that's a very important issue that we are sensitive to. Parking is very important on PARCHER, obviously, because it's fairly fully parked, but it's important everywhere. Parking serves important overflow parking needs for communities, guest parking, Certain HOAs have rules against tradesmen or even first responders parking. So even though some people view parking as a nuisance, parking is an important part of a community, and it's important for certain members of the community to be able to park their vehicles there. And without that, we wouldn't have the excellent diverse communities that we have. So, however, when we do our bike lanes, we certainly we hardly ever propose taking parking in areas where it maybe fronts some woods and there's just no one ever parking there. You know, we have on some roads proposed eliminating parking to introduce these bike lanes, but that is not what we're doing on PARCHER. But when people ask me the question, you know, will every parking space remain? The answer is no, because there's probably illegal parking going on there. Most people are aware of not parking by a fire hydrant, for instance, but you're also not supposed to park by a bus stop, a transit bus stop, that is. You're not supposed to block crosswalks. You're not supposed to park approaching a stop sign, things like that. So when we do these striping plans, they are actually engineered to reflect the laws. And so, you know, on that length of PARCHER from Centerville to Malladay, you know, yes, there's no doubt that one or two or a few parking spaces where people are currently parking illegally will probably be striped out into legal parking spaces. But 99% of the parking capacity on PARCHER will be maintained, and actually, in my opinion, improved by having the striping and the box outs of the ends and showing people, you know, where they should be parking. So the last thing I'll mention before we take questions is pedestrian safety. My job in the county, well, it began a little bit before pedestrian safety. I've worked for the county for 23 years, but in 2002, the board created the pedestrian program, and it was, in all seriousness, in response to fatalities. And we unfortunately still have fatalities, and we still have that problem today. So a big part of what we're trying to accomplish in these past couple of years with this paving program, beyond the bicycle striping and the other neighborhood benefits, is we're looking for pedestrian safety opportunities. So we work with VDOT, and we certainly look at the existing crosswalks that are out there, and we look for opportunities where they might be good places to improve the old parallel stripe crosswalks to what you see in this photo here, which is a high visibility block crosswalk. We can't do that everywhere, but we certainly do look to make those improvements. Then what staff also does is we scan the roadways for opportunities where we might think it's a good place to add a crosswalk, such as a neighborhood generator like a park or a school. Now in PARCHER, thanks to Supervisor Faust's office and the Dranesville Board of Supervisors office, we actually just added one of these concrete medians there at the elementary school. So if you're from the PARCHER community, you've actually seen one of these. And as part of this process, what we want from the public is input on pedestrian safety as well. So we want your input on the striping plans, positive or negative, preferably constructive if you think we've missed something or there's some corner we need to tweak and excuse me, make it better. But we're also looking for input on pedestrian safety. And now that the paving map is up, you know, tonight I just have PARCHER on the presentation. But if you're from somewhere else in the Dranesville district and you see that there's roads being paved in your neighborhood, and you've had a long-standing request for a crosswalk, and for some reason that's never been able to happen, please let us know that. That's not promising that it can happen. There are engineering standards that still need to be met, and we have to do a crosswalk study and things like that to document adding a crosswalk. But again, the road's being paved, and so if we can do that as part of paving, that's you know, the striping part of the challenge. The other part of the challenge is what you see in the picture is the concrete part of the challenge, and that is something that's not part of VDOT's paving. So if we do identify a location for a new crosswalk, then we also have to figure out how to make the ADA ramps, which is sort of covered by sand in that picture there, but the detectable warning surface in red there, that is mandatory, that it's part of a crosswalk, because a crosswalk has to meet the American with Disabilities Act requirements. And then if it's a wide road that might be challenging to cross with just a crosswalk, then we also can look at the opportunity to do a median refuge like you see there, which is a proven safety countermeasure, because now you cross essentially the road twice. You look at traffic coming in one direction, cross, get to the median, wait, and cross the other direction. Now, the honest answer is I don't have an actual budget for this, but again, we know that the roads are being paved, and if we're, for instance, if you're introducing a median like that, then the double yellows need to spread out and go around that. And the most cost-effective way to do that is, if the road's being paved, to have that striping done with the paving, and then Fairfax County would try to do the concrete work. So we only can do a handful of these median refuges, if any, every year. Typically 1 to 2 to 3 a year. But if there is a location, a road that's wide, again, like PARCHER was at the elementary school, it's a perfect example where it could benefit from a median refuge, and there's no conflicts like left turn lanes and things like that. Again, please let us know that. I can't promise you that, again, it would be done as part of this summer's paving, but we certainly want to know about it, do our best. And then if not, then we'll at least have it on our list of projects for future funding consideration. If there's not a median refuge, then we're just talking the 2 curb ramps. That's something that both us and VDOT have a small capacity to try and get done with paving. So with that, I'll go ahead and end my presentation and go to the slides on how to contact us. So as I said, this is dynamic. If you do have comments, we would like them by April 8th. But if you don't make April 8th, we certainly want your input all year round. For paving related comments, the best way to reach VDOT is really, they have an excellent customer service portal. It's the address you see there in the middle in blue, my.vdot.virginia.gov, or with their phone number, 1-800-4-ROAD, which is 367-7623. For us, this presentation will be live in a couple of days, and you can click on the word electronically, and that'll take you to a direct link. But here on this next slide, you have the Fairfax County contact information. The best way, that's a nice long website there, and I'm not going to read that, but you can just go to our county's website and type in the search box 2021 paving, and that'll take you to our Department of Transportation, our paving, and the Dranesville page where you can give feedback. If you want to email us directly, the email is activefairfax@fairfaxcounty.gov. And then you can also mail us comments or questions to our office, Fairfax County Department of Transportation, 4050 Legato Road, Fairfax, Virginia, 22033. So with that, one other thing that you see on the slide is how to ask a question on your phone. Again, if you're on the computer, please just use the Q&A feature in WebEx. But if you're on your phone, if you called in tonight, you can press *3 to raise your hand to be added to the queue. So with that, I will hand it off to my coworker, David, who is running the WebEx, and he can read the Q&A questions, and Steve and I can answer them. Thank you.
All right. Well, no questions so far, but we do have a comment. So Mr. Olson, thanks for the Hutchinson crosswalk. It has made a big difference. So great. That's the sort of feedback we are most happy to see. Now we do have a question. How wide will the bike lanes be?
Yep, sorry, unmuting video back on. So that really depends on the width of the roadway. Typically, we do a 5-foot, the typical bike lane is 5 feet, but if it's up against the gutter pan, then that's actually 5 feet outside the gutter pan. So the typical gutter pans are 1.5 feet to even 2 feet. if a road is even wider, then we have to balance out all that space. So I don't have the striping that's proposed for PARCHER, the actual engineering plans, but the typical parking width is 7 feet. The typical bike lane is 5 feet, and the typical travel lane is 11 feet. So if all of that adds up perfectly, that's what they would be. But since it often doesn't add up perfectly, we typically have to make some adjustments. And what we don't want to do is confuse the drivers by making the bike lane too wide. So we might actually make the travel lane 12 feet first, leave the bike lane in the parking lane. If we had another foot, we would probably add that to the parking area, make that 8 feet. And then if we had one more foot, maybe the bike lane would be 6 feet. So it really just depends on the width of the roadway and what we're doing. And the same holds true for a buffer. We're not proposing a buffered bike lane on PARCHER, but we did learn on South Lakes in Reston a couple years ago when we added a buffer bike lane that when we do that again, we're actually going to make the vehicle lane slightly wider, the buffer slightly smaller, and the bike lane slightly wider, so that there's no chance of confusing the buffer as a little tiny skinny 5-foot lane or something. So I hope that answers the question.
Next question. Bike lane areas are almost 50% covered in road debris and sand year round. Who's responsible for periodically cleaning that space?
Sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, this is Steve Welch. It's my video is just coming back on. We are. VDOT has sweeping contracts. We just released those contracts over the last week or so. I don't know the extent and how comprehensive they are, any real details about it, other than we do it based on the lane miles. We also do it based on how bad the snow season was, because obviously we're laying down a lot more sand mixtures sometimes with depending upon the weather it's been over the winter. But we also just get debris, things that fall off trucks, you know, whether that's stone, dirt, mulch, even trash sometimes, objects, what have you, that do get in the roadway. And if you do have a complaint about a certain area in particular, please feel free to jump on that my.vdot.virginia.gov site and let us know about any roads that you come across that have that issue, and we'll address it.
And I'll just add, we've shared the bike facility bike lane data with VDOT so that they're aware where all our bike lanes are. But again, I would say what Steve said: the best way to make a location specific request is with the VDOT 1-800 for road, or the my.vdot.
And I will add, and Chris, thank you, but we'll add another thing is this year. Something that we are doing is that taking a look at where all the existing bike lanes are, so that we can prioritize those bike lanes for the very reasons that gentleman asked the question about, and others, and Chris talked about earlier. And certainly we don't want sand and that problem with riding bikes, whether it's grown up and or kids in certain areas. So we're actually prioritizing or working with our contractors. Just started doing that with this season to identify all the existing bike lanes. And as Chris talked about, this has been an evolving program to have bike lanes over the last couple decades or 15 years or so. So as we progress through that, we're realizing, hey, there's some opportunities here to maybe make it better. So that's what we're working on with our sweeping contracts.
Okay, next question. What will happen to the bike lane, I guess the PARCHER bike lane at the intersection with Centerville Road? There's a left turn, which sort of narrow the travel lane as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you. So there's two things that are sort of sacrosanct about bike lanes. Is, like I said, we don't take parking, And we also don't mess with the capacity of traffic signals. So even when we do a road diet where we take a 4-lane road down to 2-lane roads, we know when that road comes to the traffic signal that the capacity with all of our traffic around here is at a premium, even if the road is carrying a moderate amount of traffic. With the way the signals are operated, there's delay, and the green time that you get is maximized, of course, if all those lanes go through. So those lanes will drop at some distance back from Centerville Road. Again, I don't have the engineering plans in front of me, but if I recall, there's certainly turn lanes there and through lanes, and they begin along the shopping centers there. So it's possible that those lanes actually drop before that shopping center entrance, but they definitely will drop at the signal so that we can maintain the capacity at the signal. If we had facilities continuing to the east, we would use the Sharrow markings or do something to take the bicyclists through the signal. But since we do not, they will just be outside of that influence area of the traffic signal. But that's an excellent technical question. Thank you.
All right, next question. Where will paving begin? There's a pedestrian crossing at Centerville Road that is brick, and then there's also a patch of asphalt due to utility work. Will bricks be replaced? Steve, is that one that maybe you could take?
So
Go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say I'm not as familiar with it, and Chris may be a little bit short.
Yeah, I was going to say if it's brick, that's probably the town of Herndon, and that is not something that we use in VDOT roadways in the county. So I have my screen up with the information, but I'm guessing that that's where Centerville Road belongs to the town of Herndon.
Looks like, Chris, that there is at the existing crossing at Centerville and PARCHER an existing brick 2 crossings that were probably part of at one time where we did do a lot of that. But what's happened, for everyone's information, obviously, is over the years what we found is that the brick itself begins to break up. Snowplows have difficulty not hitting them. And so we've kind of gotten away from the brick crosswalks, whereas the towns and cities, as Chris said, still are allowed to still do that because they maintain their own roads, but we found it rather costly to be able to do it. So it looks like it might be leftovers from a prior occasion a number of years ago.
So what we can do is we can take a look at this. We're guessing right now. We don't have the actual answer. If that does fall within the county and that does fall within the VDOT paving area, then the whole signal gets reworked. The loop detectors for cars at the signal. So if the paving runs all the way up to the edge of Centerville Road, that's a much more complicated process for VDOT, and they do a lot of work there. So thank you for that comment. We'll take a look at that to see if that falls under our area of responsibility. And if it does, then the maintenance crews can go address the safety issue. I will say that we will probably not be putting bricks back in if that falls under our responsibility. If that does not fall under our responsibility, then we can contact the town of Herndon to also make them aware of this concern. Steve can look on the VDOT end and get the paving people to figure out exactly where. Often what they do is, because of the complexity of the signal operations, is they actually also, just like we stop the bike lanes, they actually stop the paving 100, 200 feet away from the signal, and then do the whole intersection at some time when the whole intersection, like for instance, when Centerville Road is being paved. But we'll look into where that paving stops and starts, if there's an opportunity to fix it as part of paving, and if not, whose responsibility it is, and we'll pass that safety maintenance concern on. Thank you.
So this one is from Jane. Chris, she was asking if you could comment on any intersections along PARCHER that could have crosswalks installed or refreshed that staff was able to identify.
Now, unfortunately, I don't have the answer right now. My coworker Lindsay, who has been running some of these shows, if she was running the show instead of David, she's the one doing that research for us this year. So we can follow up with you, Jane, to see if there are any that either that exist and that we're improving, or if we're doing any studies to justify more crosswalks. However, if there are, if we're not, and there are locations that either Supervisor Faust's office or the community knows that would be good locations for crosswalks, please contact us via email. My email is chris.wells@fairfaxcounty.gov, WELLS, and let us know. Now, crosswalks, just for the public, I know Jane knows this, but for the public, you know, crosswalks are not like Halloween candy. We don't hand them out everywhere because crosswalks are very important to us. They need to be engineered safely. They need to indicate to the driver that there's pedestrians, and they need to indicate to the pedestrians that this is where we want you to cross. So at PARCHER is sort of a mix of two worlds. It's clearly residential, but it's also the collector in a very large residential area. So there is a lot of traffic, and so people coming out of those side streets certainly do need a way to cross the street safely. The other end of that spectrum, though, is when it is a residential neighborhood, drivers should expect pedestrians to be crossing in a residential neighborhood. So we do an engineering study that justifies the safety aspect. Is there sight distance that is critically important for it to be safe, but also is there a demand? Is there are there people using that intersection today? Is there a generator, such as we've talked about the school, but there's no doubt, and I'm not super familiar with the neighborhood, but no doubt there's a swimming pool or a park or something else that might be a local generator of pedestrians. So no, I don't know off the top of my head what else we might be thinking on PARCHER, but if anyone in the meeting tonight has a suggestion, please pass it on to us.
Next question.
Chris.
Oh, go ahead,
Sorry,
Steve.
this is Steve. Yeah, I just checked our paving plan for this year, and the pavement is stopping just to the west side of the intersection. So it's stopping short of the actual intersection itself. And as Chris said, typically we'd have a separate project that would address the intersection itself. And I'm talking again about Centerville Road and its intersection with PARCHER. So I jumped back a little bit, but I just was looking that up while Chris was addressing the last question. So just want to let you know.
Thanks, Steve. So next question, what is the process and timetable going forward for this project? Also in determining whether to go or no go.
I think they may be talking about the bike lanes project,
Sure.
Chris, on
Yep.
PARCHER.
Yes, sorry.
Sure.
Sorry, a little delay there.
Yep, sorry. So the purpose of our meeting tonight is really to make the community aware of what's being proposed here. If we want your input, so if you like it, please let us know. If you don't like it, if you're opposed to it, please also let us know that. Again, what I would hope is that that there could so there's something that we could learn from you as a resident that we don't know, because we don't live in the neighborhood. So if we're missing something, if there's something that's important, again, such as these crosswalks or something else, that there's a heavy turning movement somewhere that we need to make sure we define the right turn properly, please let us know. This is not like our traffic calming program where we have community balloting process, and 75% of the people have to vote yes or no, and stuff like that. So this is not a process like that. We've certainly in the past learned from community comments. I mentioned the South Lakes project in Reston. A couple years ago, we had a couple hundred angry people come to South Lakes High School to tell us that we had missed something. And that's what I mean by constructive input. We had missed the fact that the kiss and ride for the high school queued up along South Lakes, and that the overflow parking for the football games parked on South Lakes. And so we removed the bike lanes in the quarter mile, half mile along South Lakes High School, because there was an alternative route that bicyclists could take on bike lanes around the backside of the high school. So we absolutely want to know if we made a mistake, and we absolutely want community input. But this is not the type of process that we're taking a vote. Of course, there's only a small number of residents on the meeting tonight, and it's not a situation where we can just say, well, you know, if someone doesn't like it, we're not going to do it. We know that this is has lots of benefits, and pedestrian safety aspects are certainly things that are something we are prioritizing these days, and that's actually, you know, reversing decades of not prioritizing pedestrian safety. So it's important to us, but we want your input. So, you know, if you are opposed to what we're proposing, please do let us know. That's certainly your right, and what we want. As far as timeline, Steve has explained, but the paving happens throughout the summer. So the paving in general begins in April and ends in November. And what VDOT does to get the best contract price from the asphalt contractors is they give them the leeway to decide how best to deploy their equipment throughout the summer and balance their private sector work of shopping center parking lots and things like that. So the only way to know the exact timing of the paving is to use VDOT's interactive map, because right now it shows the roads that are being paved, nothing has started. Once it gets close to being started, the color on the map will change, and the status will change to you know, coming or you know, started, even though it may not have started yet. So that's really the way to know the timing. It could happen anytime this summer. However, as far as the parking is concerned, what the paving contractor does do is put signs up and down the road so that you know that the road's going to be paved, and they don't want your cars parked there while the road's being paved. So they'll put up these temporary paper no parking signs, typically a couple weeks in front of the paving, and that way that's your notification to know that the paving is coming, and the cars shouldn't be parked there. The map will also be updated, like I said, and you can actually then reach out to the VDOT manager in charge of the contract to get that information.
Great. Doesn't seem that we have any more questions that have come in. Just a comment from Eugene Harper: bike lanes along PARCHER Avenue could be a momentous positive effector to slow speeders. So thanks for the support. That's a big reason as to why we put it in, as Chris said. And so that's definitely a result that we would hope to see.
Okay, well, if we have no more questions, then I just would close by thanking everybody for your time. We have a county with 1.2 million residents, and so therefore, you know, 120,000 or 120,000 plus live in the Dranesville district, and not all of those folks are on the meeting tonight. So we've changed our process. A lot of the information gets out sooner, so that's actually fair to them that if they checked in on us and said, hey, you know, this looks good, they didn't need to come to the meeting. But for those of you who did take your time to come to the meeting, and for those of you who do take your time to provide us comments, we appreciate that, because this is what we do for a living, but we work for you. You are the residents of this county, and it's taking care of this community that we take pride in our jobs. So we appreciate your time tonight. We appreciate your interest. Please do stay involved in all county and state issues that affect your community. Your Dranesville District Supervisor office is typically your best way to know the wide variety of things that's going on. But on behalf of the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, I certainly want to thank everybody's participation.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chris.
All right, thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Take care.